Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hey, welcome back to the Stepmom Side podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the seriously confusing parts of being a stepmom. Today, let's chat about what do we do when our stepkids come back from college or they have come back from some sort of break. Maybe they're not at college, maybe they're at trade school, or maybe they're just like rebounding and or a boomeranging and coming back to live with you. Let's talk about that, but specifically we'll narrow in on if they're coming back from college for a holiday break, but you can use this for boomerang as well. So it might feel like your whole entire life is disrupted because the kids are back. And yeah, honestly, they've returned and suddenly all of those peace and quiet moments that you've started to love, well, it seems like those are about to be tested. Actually, they will be tested, let's be honest. So let's talk about how to navigate having your stepkids home from college or if they've boomeranged, how to set boundaries, really expectations, and how to actually enjoy this phase without losing what seems like your ever-loving mind, right? So first things first, let's talk about the back home adjustment reality check. So remember when they were in the house and they would transition back and forth between your house and their other parents' house, sometimes it took a while to transition, or sometimes it took a while to get into that new routine that happens at your house. Maybe your house is the strict house. So it's kind of going to be the same thing here. So let's get real for a second. When stepkids come home from college, it can be an adjustment, definitely, to say the least. They've been living independently. So not only have they not had the other house influencing them, they've been doing whatever it is that they want, however they want, whenever they want, all of the things, right? So they've been living independently. They've been making their own decisions. They've been coming and going as they please. And then now suddenly they're back in your house and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Because to you, they're still, even if they are adults, they're kind of adults, right? Because you still possibly view them as your partner's kids. And this means, please hear me when I say this, this means that the boundaries you had when they were in high school aren't necessarily the same that you're going to have now. They're not quite right for this stage, but you can't just give your stepkids free reign. Yes, they are adults. However, they're in your house, right? So this is your house. That's really important to note. This is your house. What is happening at your house? You guys have your own routine and your own boundaries or expectations, even if they are unspoken. So let's start by acknowledging the obvious. Your life also has routines. You've built a whole system that works for your household. And now there's a new kind of new person thrown into the mix. And if you're like a lot of the stepmoms I work with, you're probably feeling a mix of emotions. Maybe happy that they're home, really nervous about the inevitable friction, and probably dreading, yeah, dreading is definitely the word I'm going to use, dreading the impending mess and the late nights and the noise and all of the things, right? You go from having your peace and quiet house to now you've got this person coming and going whenever they want, and it's so freaking maddening. So let's start with setting boundaries or expectations. And yes, you can set them even with college kids. But here's the trick. Boundaries or expectations are probably going to be a little bit hard because they're like, well, I'm only here for a little bit of time. And, it's an adjustment for them because they've been doing whatever it is that they want for however long they want. And then now they're going to come back to jail, so to speak. Or now they're going to come back and they have all of these things that they're going to have to abide by. And maybe that doesn't feel great, but boundaries, expectations, they are your friend. And I know that those words might be a little overused, but when it comes to blending families, it's basically gold. That's why you hear so many people talk about it all of the time. So how do you actually get some good ones with college kids? So let's walk through a few examples. And first of all, if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of having open, honest communication or conversations as soon as they come back, because the longer you let it slide, for me, the more things bubble up and it's just rah. But if we can get ahead of it, that's That's going to be the key. So grab some coffee or sit down as a family and just talk about expectations. And don't be afraid to lay it out. Say something like, look, I know you're used to doing your own thing at school. No, I'm just kidding. Don't say it in that tone. You can just be like, I wouldn't start with look, but depending on your relationship, I guess, like with my stepson, I would absolutely do that. With my stepdaughter, I would not. But you can just highlight the fact that, like, hey, you know what? I know that you're used to doing your own thing at school, but while you're here, let's make sure that we're all on the same page so everyone's comfortable. Everyone is comfortable, even if some people are having to like give a few things up. So here are a few ground rules that I suggest to the stepmoms that I work with. One, curfews and check-ins. Oh my gosh, like having been through this, yes, please set the curfews, set the check-ins. And like I've said, they probably have done whatever they've wanted at college. They've had total freedom. But if they're out late, it's respectful to let you and your partner and everyone else know what they're doing, like where they're going to be. Maybe not necessarily have to tell you what they're going to be doing or like where they're going to be, but like, hey, I'm going to be late or I'm not going to come out or I'm not going to come back tonight. You don't have to go full drill sergeant, but it's fair to ask for a quick heads up. Like they don't have to call you. They could just text you like I'm not coming back tonight. I'm gonna stay at a friend's or I'm going to my mom's house or whatever it is. But let you guys know what is happening. Like, all right, am I coming back or not? Like, do you guys need to stay up? Like, do you need to leave the door unlocked? What's the deal? Like, that's number one, curfews and check-ins. Two, noise levels. If you go to bed at 10 p.m. and they're just getting in at 1 a.m., this can be a nightmare. So encourage quiet hours or suggest that they hang out in a specific part of the house. Man, my words are hard today. But hang out in a specific part of the house if they're going to be up late. Same thing if they're going to have friends over or like college friends or friends from the area that they haven't seen since last year or over summer or whenever it is. It's okay for you to be like, hey, you know what? We also have to work tomorrow. Can you keep the noise down? Or, hey, you know what? We've got little ones in the house that have school tomorrow. Can you keep the noise down? That's completely reasonable. Completely reasonable to be saying, hey, in this house at this time, it's kind of quiet. So everyone can get some sleep. If you guys want to hang out, great, but just keep the noise down. And then in the back of your head, you can say, otherwise, you guys won't be hanging out here anymore. So, number two is keep the noise or like the noise levels, like just communicate what that looks like. Number three, and like the most stressful one, is household responsibilities. This one is so key because they're technically adults now, so ask them to pitch in. They're guests, right? Because they don't live there anymore. So they're guests, but they're also family, which means that they can help with dishes, groceries, even cooking a meal here and there. This can also prevent resentment on your side from building up. So leaving their socks out or leaving their pants out or, leaving dirty dishes out or, going through all of your stuff. My thing is I'm always like, okay, if you empty something, please tell me so I can go and get more of it because what's going to happen is I'm going to go get some and there's not going to be anything left and I'm going to be like, what the hell? Then I'm going to be like really pissed. So communicate all of the things. So then three things that I recommend: curfews and check-ins, noise levels, and household responsibilities. Those are the big things that I recommend to stepmoms when I'm coaching them. And now I'm going to tell you since you're listening to the podcast. So you're like, okay, Alicia, that's great. But what do I do if they're like, absolutely not, I'm not on board? Or maybe it's your partner that's like, nope. So let's talk about how to handle pushback. Like, what if they're not on board? And here's the thing, boundaries and expectations sound really great in theory, right? But maybe your stepkid is not loving this, or maybe your partner's not loving this, and they might push back or act like you're trying to ruin their break. So now what do you do? But you're listening to this, so you want some advice or you want some tips. First, remember this: it's not a you versus them situation. If they're not happy with the rules, try asking questions like, well, you can just go stay with your mom, right? No, I'm kidding. Please do not ask that. But try asking questions like, what can we agree on so everyone's comfortable? Remember, we're trying to do everyone. It's a collaborative thing. Or how can we make this work for all of us? Sometimes showing them that you're willing to meet them halfway and you're willing to be flexible allows them to, or gives them the permission, I guess, to like be flexible and to meet you halfway. And then they start to see it as like, okay, she's not just being an evil bitch, like she actually wants to help me, or it's not like me versus them. Okay, wait, I understand what you're saying. I'm here for break. I don't live here anymore. This isn't like really my house. Like I'm just a guest here for a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And it is weird. It's a weird dynamic because you got this life now without them. And everyone has their own like feelings about it. Like you might be happy about it. Your partner might be like, oh, I've missed them. Your stepkid might be like, oh, this is weird because I'm back with my parents and like, I don't know where I fit in, like all of the things. So if your stepkid is really resistant, it might be a conversation that you just let your partner handle. And listen, don't be afraid to be specific here. Talk about what you're seeing and how it's affecting you. Make it clear that the goal isn't to control, but to create a home environment that works for everyone. And if you are like I was in my early years and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have a list of like 800 things to do, like, let's not do that because that is kind of a nightmare for you. I mean, it's a nightmare for everyone, but like for you too, because how do you enforce 800 things? You can't. So just have some specific things that really bother you, like the dishes being left out or emptying the snacks or like your favorite whatever, the noise level, whatever it is, make sure that you are very specific and very clear. We're not just going to go for everything at this point. And you know what? Here's the best part about being a stepmom. You can step back, do some self-care for yourself. And I know I've talked about this quite a bit lately on the podcast, but for you, while your stepkids are home from any sort of break, especially during the college break, make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're getting self-care for you. So let's talk about you for a second, because yeah, it's your home too, and dealing with an adult child back in your space is no small task. And during this time, I really, really, really want you to prioritize your self-care. So here's some things to keep in mind. One, set time for yourself. Go for a walk, hit the gym, read that book that you've been eyeing, or the one like mine that's like on one of our end tables. I've been trying to read it for, I don't know, 2 years, and I'm like 50 pages in. Read that book. Make sure you have a space to decompress, especially if it's been a chaotic day or things are just like getting to you. Number two, lean on your partner. This is a team effort. If you feel like the boundaries you're setting aren't being respected, talk to your partner about it. Because the reality of the situation is they need to be on board for this to work. And this isn't one of those situations where you just go in guns blazing, because I've done this, and said, these are going to be the expectations. This is what we're going to do. You are going to be on board because that's going to go over like a lead balloon. No one is going to be on board, and this break is going to be a disaster. So you have an idea of what your expectations want to be, or what you want your expectations for the house to be, and then ask your partner what they want their expectations for the house to be. And then you guys can kind of collaborate together. And again, that meeting in the middle or coming halfway and just trying to find something that works for both of you, and then have the conversation with your stepkid or stepkids. Number three, give yourself some grace, especially if this is the first time that you've ever navigated this. It is really, really hard. It's okay to feel a little uncomfortable or a little irritated by the sudden change in your routine. How much do you thrive on a routine? I totally do. So when my routine is like thrown off, I'm like, and it like makes me crazy, makes me like irritable, like really irritable. So just remember that this is temporary. They're going to go back to school eventually. Maybe not soon enough in your eyes, but eventually they're going to go back to school. So give yourself a little bit of grace for navigating this. If one of your friends came to you and said, hey, I'm experiencing this, what would you say to them? Whatever it is that you would say to them, say that to yourself. Number four, don't forget to enjoy it. Yes, really, don't forget to enjoy it. And maybe you're thinking, how? Like, how am I going to enjoy this? But here's the thing. Sometimes the best memories are made in these weird, messy, challenging times. And sometimes this phase of life can be a chance to bond in new ways. So if there's an opportunity to go out for coffee with them or have a movie night, try to seize those moments when you can. Or maybe it's you guys like cooking dinner or just something shoulder to shoulder. I talk a lot about shoulder to shoulder activity, something that you're doing side by side. But there will be times that you're like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't as bad as I thought. Or, your stepkid will leave, your stepkids will leave and go back to college or wherever they were. And you'll be like, oh, it really wasn't as bad as I thought that it was. Hmm, maybe I should have relaxed a little bit. But yeah, just enjoy it a little bit. So for self-care, number one, don't forget to set time for yourself. Number two, lean on your partner. Please lean on your partner. Number three, give yourself some grace. Number four, don't forget to enjoy it. And that is a wrap for this week's episode on the Stepmom Side podcast. I hope these tips help you keep it at peace and actually, hopefully, actually enjoy this wild college home for the break stage. But remember, this is a learning process for both you and your stepchild. And I guess we can throw in your partner as well. But it's okay if it's a little bumpy. Give yourself that grace as long as you're all communicating and respecting each other. You will come out of this in one piece. I promise. I've lived to tell the stories. And hey, if you're going through this right now, I'd love to hear your stories, your tips. You can drop me a message or join the community and keep the conversation going. And as always, stay strong and remember, you're doing an amazing job. I know you don't hear that often as a stepmom, but you're doing a really great job. I will chat with you next week. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.